What if the conflict over Palestine isn't just a political battle or a territorial dispute, but a divine mystery unfolding before our very eyes? For centuries, empires, leaders, and nations have fought over this land, yet every attempt at peace has crumbled. Why? Could it be that this struggle was foretold in ancient prophecies, sealed in the pages of the Bible? In this video, we'll uncover the untold story of Palestine, a land woven into the fabric of biblical prophecy, destined to play a pivotal role in the fate of humanity. Stick around as we unravel the spiritual and prophetic significance of the Holy Land and discover how its destiny ties directly to the future of the world. Chapter 1: The Truth About Palestine in Biblical Prophecies. The conflict over Palestine has dominated headlines for decades, often painted as a struggle over politics, land, and national identity. But what if the true essence of this battle goes much deeper, beyond the reach of human hands? According to the Bible, the turmoil surrounding Palestine is not just a geopolitical dispute, but a fulfillment of ancient prophecies rooted in divine plans. This land, often called the cradle of faith, holds a unique place in God's narrative, intertwined with His promises and judgments. Thousands of years ago, the Bible foretold a spiritual struggle over this territory, one that would persist until the end of days. The story of Palestine is more than history. It is prophecy in motion. By understanding the spiritual significance of this land, we begin to see that the ongoing conflict is not meant to be solved through peace treaties or political negotiations. Instead, it is a part of God's sovereign design, a stage for His ultimate plan for humanity. This chapter sets the foundation for uncovering the truth about Palestine in the Bible, a truth that reveals the deeper prophetic meaning behind the chaos we see today. Chapter 2: The Prophetic Nature of the Palestine Conflict. The Bible paints a vivid picture of the events leading up to the end of the world, and at the center of this divine drama lies Palestine. This conflict isn't just a battle over borders, it is a spiritual war that has been raging for centuries. Biblical prophecies written thousands of years ago describe the struggles over this land as a key part of God's ultimate plan. From the words of the prophets to the visions of Revelation, Palestine is consistently portrayed as a land of significance, where earthly events echo the heavenly narrative. The scriptures reveal that this land will be a focal point of global attention, a cup of trembling for the nations, as foretold in Zechariah. The ongoing turmoil is not a failure of diplomacy, but a confirmation of prophecy, unfolding exactly as written. This conflict is a signpost of the end times, pointing to the fulfillment of God's promises. Understanding this truth changes everything. It reveals that the struggle over Palestine is not random, but a divinely orchestrated chapter in humanity's story, one that no human intervention can rewrite. Chapter 3: The Biblical Origins of Palestine. To understand the prophetic importance of Palestine, we must first trace its origins to the ancient land of Canaan. The Bible describes Canaan as a land promised by God to Abraham and his descendants, a covenant that established its significance for generations to come. Before the Israelites, Canaan was inhabited by diverse tribes collectively known as the Canaanites. These people were steeped in idol worship and practices that stood in direct opposition to the worship of the one true God. When God promised this land to Abraham, it wasn't just a gift, it was part of His plan to establish a holy people in a land set apart for His purposes. The conquest of Canaan by the Israelites under Joshua was not merely a military campaign. It was a fulfillment of God's promise and a judgment against the wickedness of its inhabitants. Over time, this land became a stage for divine encounters, blessings, and judgments. The biblical narrative reveals that the land we now call Palestine has always been more than a geographical space. It is a covenant land, a place where God's plans intersect with human history, and its spiritual significance continues to shape the events of the present. Chapter 4: The Role of the Philistines in Biblical History. The Philistines, whose name forms the root of Palestine, played a pivotal role in biblical history as recurring adversaries of Israel. Originating from the Aegean region, these seafaring people settled along the coastal areas of Canaan, establishing city-states such as Gaza, Ashkelon, and Ashdod. From the time of Abraham to the early monarchy of Israel, the Philistines were a constant threat, clashing with God's chosen people in some of the Bible's most memorable conflicts. Figures like Goliath, the Philistine giant defeated by David, symbolize more than physical enemies. They represent spiritual opposition to God's covenant with Israel. The Philistines worshipped false gods like Dagon and Baal, and their pagan practices often tempted Israel to stray from their faith. These struggles weren't merely territorial, they were spiritual battles for the soul of the land. Even after the Philistines vanished as a distinct people, their name endured as a marker of the region. Their legacy as adversaries of God's people is echoed in the ongoing conflicts over this land, serving as a reminder of the spiritual dimension underlying the battle for Palestine. Chapter 5. Palestine through the lens of foreign empires. After the biblical era, Palestine became a crossroads for empires, each leaving its mark on the land and its people. Following the Babylonian exile, the Persians allowed the Israelites to return and rebuild, but foreign dominance over the region persisted. The Greeks brought Hellenistic culture, and the Romans solidified their control with a series of conquests, culminating in the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD. Later, the Byzantine Empire, Islamic caliphates, and the Ottoman Empire governed the land, shaping its demographics and identity. During the Ottoman period, Palestine became home to diverse communities of Jews, Christians, and Muslims. It was here that the modern Palestinian identity began to take shape, influenced by centuries of Arab cultural and religious dominance. Each empire's rule reflected the region's importance, not just politically, but spiritually. A land coveted by rulers, yet destined for God's purposes. These historical layers show how Palestine has always been at the center of global power struggles, while remaining a key piece in the divine puzzle foretold in Scripture. Chapter 6. Prophetic significance of Jerusalem. Jerusalem stands at the heart of biblical prophecy, a city chosen by God to carry out his divine purposes. It was here that King David established his throne and Solomon built the temple, making Jerusalem the center of worship for Israel. Throughout history, the city has been a symbol of God's covenant with his people and a place where his presence was made manifest. Prophets like Zechariah and Joel foretold that Jerusalem would play a central role in the end times, describing it as a cup of trembling and a burdensome stone for the nations. Today, the ongoing struggle over Jerusalem reflects these prophecies, as it remains a focal point of global tension. According to Scripture, Jerusalem will one day witness the return of Jesus Christ, who will reign as king and establish God's eternal kingdom. Its significance goes beyond its physical boundaries. It is a spiritual epicenter, a city where God's past promises, present plans, and future fulfillment converge. The story of Jerusalem is not just history, it is prophecy unfolding before our eyes. Chapter 7. Divine Judgment and the Fate of Nations. The Bible issues strong warnings to nations that attempt to divide or control the land promised to Israel. From the prophet Joel's declaration that God will gather all nations to the valley of Jehoshaphat for judgment, to Zechariah's chilling description of Jerusalem as a burdensome stone, Scripture makes it clear that meddling with this land brings divine consequences. Joel 3 verse 2 explicitly states that God will judge nations for scattering his people and dividing his land, reflecting a clear link between human actions and divine response. Revelation also describes the final battle at Armageddon, located in modern-day Palestine, where the nations of the world will unite against God's purposes, only to face ultimate defeat. These prophecies underscore the spiritual significance of the land and its role in God's redemptive plan. Efforts to resolve the conflict through political agreements or territorial divisions may seem pragmatic, but the Bible portrays such actions as part of a greater spiritual struggle, one that will culminate in God's intervention and judgment. Chapter 8. Ancient Roots of Modern Conflicts. The roots of today's Arab-Israeli conflict stretch deep into biblical history, where the seeds of rivalry were sown between Isaac and Ishmael, the sons of Abraham. Isaac, through whom the covenant was established, became the father of the Israelites, while Ishmael is traditionally regarded as the forefather of the Arab peoples. This ancient familial tension, described in Genesis, was not just a family dispute, but a prophetic foreshadowing of broader struggles over the land. Similarly, the descendants of Esau, Jacob's brother, known as Edomites, are often depicted in the Bible as adversaries of Israel. The book of Obadiah, for example, pronounces judgment on Edom for their hostility toward Israel. These ancient rivalries laid the groundwork for the ongoing tensions between Jews and Arabs over the land of Palestine. The Bible portrays these conflicts not merely as political disputes, but as spiritual battles tied to God's covenant and promises. Understanding these ancient narratives helps illuminate the deeper forces at play in today's geopolitical struggles. Chapter 9. Palestine in End Times Prophecies. The land of Palestine, and especially Jerusalem, is central to biblical end times prophecies, marking the climax of human history. Zechariah 12 verse 3 warns of a time when all nations will gather against Jerusalem, only to find themselves broken under the weight of divine judgment. Revelation speaks of the final battle in the Valley of Armageddon, a conflict that will engulf the world in a struggle between good and evil. At the heart of these prophecies is Jerusalem, described as the city where Jesus will return and establish his reign. The ongoing tensions in the region, particularly over the control of Jerusalem, mirror the biblical narrative, suggesting that these prophecies are unfolding before our eyes. The Bible portrays the land of Palestine not as a mere geopolitical hotspot, but as the stage for God's ultimate plan for humanity. The events surrounding this land are not random, but orchestrated within the framework of prophecy, pointing to a future where God's justice and kingdom will prevail. Chapter 10. The Role of the Messiah in Reconciliation. The resolution of the conflict over Palestine lies not in human diplomacy, but in the divine intervention of the Messiah. For Christians, the return of Jesus Christ is the pivotal moment when justice, peace, and reconciliation will be established. Zechariah 14 describes a day when the Messiah will stand on the Mount of Olives, defeating the nations that oppose Jerusalem and inaugurating God's eternal kingdom. Isaiah 2 verse 4 envisions a time when swords will be turned into plowshares and nations will no longer wage war. This vision of peace extends to all peoples, including the Palestinians, as the Messiah's reign will bring healing and restoration. The Bible portrays the Messiah as the only one capable of resolving the spiritual, political, and territorial conflicts surrounding this land. In the end, it is through the Messiah's return that the promises of Scripture will be fulfilled, and the land of Palestine will become a place of peace and reconciliation for all nations. Chapter 11. Hope for Future Reconciliation. Amid the prophecies of conflict and judgment, the Bible also paints a remarkable picture of hope and reconciliation for the region. Isaiah 19 offers a prophetic glimpse of unity, envisioning a time when Israel, Egypt, and Assyria will come together in peace, worshiping the one true God. This vision is extraordinary in its scope, describing a day when former enemies will forge bonds of friendship, becoming a blessing to the world. Blessed be Egypt, my people, Assyria, my handiwork, and Israel, my inheritance, declares the Lord, highlighting his redemptive plan for all nations, not just one. This hope is echoed in other scriptures that speak of God's plan to bring peace to the Middle East, reconciling warring factions and healing deep divisions. While the path to this peace remains unclear in human terms, the Bible assures us that it will come through God's sovereign intervention. This chapter reminds us that the conflict is not the end of the story. God's plan for reconciliation holds the promise of a brighter future, one where justice and peace will prevail. Chapter 12. The Spiritual Significance of the Land. The land of Palestine holds unparalleled spiritual significance, chosen by God as the stage for his divine purposes. It is the land where God made his covenant with Abraham, where kings like David and Solomon ruled, and where Jesus Christ walked, taught, and sacrificed himself for humanity. More than a physical territory, this land symbolizes God's promises, faithfulness, and ultimate plan for redemption. Throughout Scripture, Palestine is depicted as a place of divine encounters, from Moses on Mount Sinai to the prophesied return of Christ to Jerusalem. The spiritual importance of this land extends beyond borders and nationalities. It is a tangible reminder of God's work in history and his plan for the future. As the Bible closes in Revelation, the imagery of a new Jerusalem descending from heaven reflects the fulfillment of God's eternal purpose. This chapter concludes by emphasizing that the resolution of the conflict over this sacred land will not come through human efforts, but through divine intervention, when God's eternal kingdom is fully realized. Conclusion. In the end, the story of Palestine is not just about a land or a conflict, it's about the unfolding of God's eternal plan. The Bible reveals that peace will come, not through human negotiations, but through divine intervention when God's promises are fulfilled. This is a story of hope, redemption, and the ultimate triumph of God's will. If this journey through Scripture has deepened your understanding, don't forget to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel for more thought-provoking insights. Join the conversation in the comments, and let's explore these powerful truths together. Your support helps us continue this mission to uncover the stories that matter most.